My daughter said, "You won't need money in heaven," and something in her tone made the floor shift beneath me. It was just after lunch. Linda was rinsing dishes at the sink, her voice too light for the words she'd just spoken. She turned halfway toward me, holding a damp plate like it was a casual conversation. "I mean," she added with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "you're 72. You should enjoy what you have, not worry about all those numbers in your account." I sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a lukewarm cup of tea. The sunlight through the window caught the edge of her marble countertop, the one I'd paid for last spring. I looked at her face, the way her eyebrows rose just enough to suggest innocence, but not surprise. She didn't repeat herself. She didn't have to. I had heard her, and I understood. For years, I had chosen silence over conflict. After my husband passed, I sold our house and moved into the granny flat behind Linda's place. It was practical, sensible. "You'll be close to the grandkids," she said, "and we can keep an eye on each other." I'd thought it was love. Maybe it had been, at first. Now, I wasn't sure what any of it was. "You okay, Mom?" Linda asked, drying her hands on a dish towel. "You look pale." "I'm fine," I said. My voice didn't tremble, but I was suddenly aware of every sound in the room. The hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock, the way my tea cooled untouched in my cup. Later that evening, when I was back in the flat, I tried to remember if she'd ever said something like that before. I couldn't recall, but I started to notice other things. Little things. Like how she always offered to pick up my mail before I got to the box. How she insisted on handling my online banking because those websites are so confusing. How the handyman showed up last week to fix a roof leak I hadn't mentioned and sent the bill to my name. The next morning, I opened my bank account from the old laptop my husband used to tinker with. I hadn't logged in for months. I'd trusted her, trusted my daughter. It took 3 tries to get the password right. When I did, the numbers on the screen didn't make sense. 3 large withdrawals in the last month. One for a new HVAC unit. I remembered Linda complaining about hers breaking. Another to a Green Lake Renovations. And one that said only, WCL Investment Fund. I stared at the screen so long I forgot to breathe. She had access. I'd given it willingly after my husband died. She said she'd just help with bills. "Nothing major, Mom. Just a safety net." I closed the laptop slowly. That evening, I asked her, "What's this WCL fund?" My voice was quiet, even. She blinked. "What?" "My account," I said. "There's a payment, 10,000, WCL Investment Fund." "Oh, that. Don't worry. It's something Alan's work is doing. It's completely safe." Alan was her husband, an accountant, or financial advisor. I was never sure. All I knew was he'd never looked me in the eye for more than a few seconds. I nodded. I didn't argue. But that night, I took out a notebook and started writing down dates, numbers, names. I also remembered something else. 2 weeks earlier, Linda had brought me a cup of cocoa before bed. "You should rest more," she'd said gently. "You've been looking tired lately." It hadn't struck me as strange at the time. Now it did. That same week, she insisted on organizing my medications. "You take too many. Let me sort it out for you." She'd smiled, and I'd let her. The next day, I called my bank and asked a polite young man if he could walk me through my transaction history. "Of course, Mrs. Rains," he said cheerfully. "Let me verify a few things." He read off a list of charges. Most I didn't recognize. Some were small: online shopping, electronics. One was a wine delivery service I never used. Another was a retainer for a law firm. Could you tell me who authorized those? I asked, pretending curiosity. Sure. They were initiated from the joint access. Authorized user, Linda Connors. I thanked him and hung up. Then I sat on my bed for a long time, staring at the pale green wall. My daughter was draining my money, and from the way she'd smiled yesterday, she didn't think I'd live long enough to notice. That's when I knew. I didn't sleep that night. At 3 in the morning, I sat at the kitchen table with the light off, watching the shadows shift across the linoleum. The house was quiet. From Linda's side, nothing but the occasional creak of pipes. I could still hear her words from the day before. Soft, casual, almost kind. You won't need money in heaven. Maybe she thought I was ready to go. Maybe she was helping that along. In the morning, I made myself toast and sat with it untouched. The bank figures spun in my mind. I remembered when I first added Linda to my accounts 6 years ago, after Tom died. I was tired, overwhelmed, and she was so efficient, so sure. We'll just make it easier, she said. If anything happens, I can step in quickly. It's safer this way. I believed her. By 8 o'clock, I'd made a list, not just of the withdrawals, but of the phrases, the moments, when she asked if I was feeling more tired lately, when Alan brought up assisted living over dinner, just for future planning, when my heating had been mysteriously turned off last winter, and she said, "Don't worry, Mom, I'll take care of it." She always said it kindly, like a daughter who cared too much. By 10, I was at the library, using the public computers to print out 6 months of statements. I didn't want to risk the printer in my flat, which beeped and clicked unpredictably. I tucked the papers into my coat and walked home the long way, past the park where I used to take Sarah, my granddaughter, when she was small. I thought of her often now. She still called, still stopped by. A quiet girl with more sense in her at 17 than most adults I knew. That afternoon, I waited until Linda was out on errands. Then I walked the short distance to the main house and knocked. Sarah answered, surprised. "Grandma?" "Hi, darling. Is your mom home?" "She just left for the store," Sarah said, stepping back. "Come in. Want tea?" "No tea, just a question." She tilted her head, curious. "What's wrong? Have you ever heard your mom or Alan talk about what happens if something happens to me?" I kept my voice even. Sarah hesitated. "Like health stuff? Or financial?" She paused longer this time, then nodded, just once. "They had a file on the kitchen counter last week. I saw your name on it." "What kind of file?" "I don't know. Mom closed it fast. But it looked official." I studied her face. Honest. Worried. Not surprised. "I want to ask you something else," I said, softer now. "If I weren't here anymore, what would happen to my accounts? Do you know?" She blinked. "I think everything goes to Mom, right?" I nodded. "That's what she thinks, too." Sarah bit her lip. "Is something wrong?" "Yes," I said. "Something is very wrong, but I'm going to fix it." She reached for my hand instinctively, warm, steady, the only hand lately that didn't want something from me. Later that evening, Linda came by my flat, her hair perfect, her makeup casual but precise. "You were out today," she said too lightly. "Doing anything fun?" I smiled. "Just errands." "Oh, good. You've been cooped up lately. You need fresh air. And you left your back door unlocked, by the way. Anyone could walk in." The smile stayed on my lips. "Anyone already did, didn't they?" She blinked. "The insurance documents were moved," I said. "They're not where I left them." Linda's face flickered for a second, barely, but enough. "Maybe you forgot," she said quickly. "You've been tired lately. maybe a little forgetful. I nodded slowly. That must be it. She left soon after, saying she had dinner to prepare. As soon as the door closed behind her, I took out the printed statements and began highlighting. I also opened my drawer and found the document I'd once signed, a durable power of attorney. Linda's name, right there. My lawyer had warned me back then. Only give this to someone you'd trust with your life. I had. Now I was taking it back. The next morning, I called my old lawyer, Gregory Hale. I hadn't spoken to him since Tom's estate was finalized, but his voice was the same, measured, polite, not easily rattled. "Mrs. Rains," he said, after I explained briefly, "I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm glad you reached out. I'd be happy to help. Do you still have the original power of attorney document?" "I do," I said, "and I want it revoked. Today. I can draw up the revocation and a new financial directive for your signature, but I'll need you to come into the office. Is this urgent?" I looked around my flat, at the neat bookshelf. The flowers Sarah had brought me 2 weeks ago, now wilted. At the quiet hum of a life that no longer felt like mine. "Yes," I said, "it's urgent." By noon, I was in his office downtown, sitting across from the same oak desk I'd sat behind when Tom died. I remembered that day. I'd worn navy. I wore navy again today. Gregory laid the documents before me. "This," he said, tapping the first page, "revokes the durable power of attorney granted to Linda Connors, effective immediately. This second document creates a new directive. All financial decisions must be approved by you, and you alone. Unless you choose another authorized party." "I don't," I said. He nodded. "And I'd recommend changing your account passwords. All of them. I already have." Gregory smiled faintly. "Then you're ahead of most." I signed each page with a hand steadier than I'd expected. When I left the office, the wind caught the edge of my scarf, and I let it flap for a moment in the breeze. A small, stupid freedom. But it felt good. At home, I went online and removed Linda as an authorized user from my bank accounts. I closed the joint savings. I set up 2 new accounts with limited access, both under my full name, with multi-factor authentication. I made sure nothing linked back to her. It took the rest of the afternoon. At 6, there was a knock at the door. It was Linda. She smiled, but her eyes were tight. "I was just checking in. Sarah said you went to town today?" I nodded. "Had a meeting." "With who?" I met her gaze. "My lawyer." Her face froze. "Everything okay?" she asked after a pause. "Everything's fine," I said. "But I needed to update a few things. Just routine." She smiled again, thinner this time. "Good. It's important to keep things in order, especially at your age." There it was again. Your age. Always said like a pillow over the face. "I've decided," I said, "to handle my finances myself from now on." "Oh?" "Yes. I've closed the joint accounts. I've updated all passwords. I've also signed a revocation of power of attorney." Her mouth opened, then closed. She blinked rapidly. "Mom, why would you... Did someone say something to you?" "Yes," I said quietly. "You did. Several times. And I finally heard it." She stared at me. "This is hurtful. I've only ever tried to help." "Help," I repeated. "Like withdrawing thousands of dollars for home renovations I never agreed to? Help like moving my medications and making sure I couldn't access them without you? Help like telling Sarah I probably wouldn't be around much longer?" Her face went red. "That's not what I meant, but it's what you said." The air in the room was heavy. She stood there, as if trying to decide whether to scream or beg. Instead, She stepped back. You're being paranoid. Honestly, Mom, maybe you should talk to someone. I have. My lawyer, my bank, and now you. Her mouth twisted. You're making a mistake. No, I said. I'm correcting one. She left without another word. Later that night, I wrote a letter to the bank confirming all changes in writing. Then I sat down and looked at my will. It hadn't been updated since Tom passed. Back then, I left everything to Linda. I stared at that line for a long time. Then I picked up the phone and called Gregory again. Mr. Hale, I said, I'd like to update my will, and I'd like to name a new beneficiary. I didn't expect Sarah to show up that evening. She knocked gently, like always, and peeked her head in before I could even answer. Are you okay? She asked. Mom's not. I gestured her in. Come sit. She dropped her backpack by the door and sat at the little table where I usually read the paper. She looked older than 17 today, tired around the eyes, like someone who'd been holding in too much for too long. She came home slamming cabinets, Sarah said. Said you were making things complicated. What happened? I took back what was mine, I said. And your mother didn't like it. Sarah nodded slowly. She said you were confused, that someone's gotten into your head. I raised an eyebrow. Do I seem confused to you? She smiled a little. No, not even close. I poured us tea. Not the herbal kind Linda buys for show, but the real black stuff I keep in a tin marked salon. Sarah always liked the smell. She ever talked to you about what would happen to me? I asked, keeping my tone light. Sarah looked uncomfortable. Not directly, but I've overheard things. Stuff about managing your assets, about memory decline. She told Alan you were starting to slip. I didn't think much of it. I figured it was just her being dramatic. Did she say anything about money? Sarah hesitated, then she nodded. Once. She said, soon Mom won't need much. It'll all come to us eventually. I thought she meant the usual, inheritance stuff. I didn't think she meant soon. I watched her carefully. She was honest. Still, I hated that she'd been forced to hear those words. To live between what's right and what's easy. I'm updating my will, I said. Changing the beneficiary. She looked up, startled. You don't have to tell me that. I do, I said. Because it's you. Her mouth opened in surprise. I don't want it to be a reward, I said. Not for loyalty. Not for kindness. Just because you're the only one who sees me clearly. And because I know you won't spend it on marble countertops or staged photos. Sarah looked like she might cry. Grandma, I don't care about your money. I know, I said. That's exactly why. We drank our tea in silence for a while. Do you know what they were planning? I asked. She shook her head. I think they were going to suggest a wellness facility. That's what Mom called it last week. She said she was researching places with controlled medication environments. I asked if you were sick, and she said, not yet, but soon. I clenched my hands under the table. Not out of fear, but anger. Controlled. Quiet. She thinks I won't fight back, I said. She thinks I'm still the woman who lets things slide. Sarah reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. You're not that woman anymore. I looked at her hand. Warm, steady. She didn't flinch. She's going to push harder now, I said. You know that. Sarah nodded. She already is. She asked to see my phone today. Said she wanted to know who I was texting. You told her? No, she said, firm. I told her I'm not a child. I smiled. We made a quiet agreement then. Nothing formal, no words, just two women, separated by decades, bound now by truth. When she left, I watched her walk down the path to the main house. Her shoulders were squared. She looked strong, stronger than I ever had at her age, and I made a promise to myself. I would not leave her to clean up a mess I'd been too afraid to face. Not anymore. Linda came by the next morning, without knocking. She still had the spare key. I made no move to stop her. She walked in briskly, like someone arriving at a meeting they intended to dominate. Her heels clicked against the floor, her bag slung high on her shoulder like a weapon. "We need to talk," she said. I closed the book I'd been reading and folded my hands in my lap. "All right." She didn't sit. "I don't know what's gotten into you," she began. "But this thing with the lawyer, the accounts, it's making everything harder than it needs to be." "For who?" I asked. "For everyone," she said sharply. "For me, for Alan, for Sarah. You're turning everything upside down, and for what? Some kind of statement?" "No," I said. "For control. Over my own life. My own money." Her eyes narrowed. "You're being paranoid." I stood. Slowly. My knees creaked, but I didn't waver. "Don't call me paranoid. That word's a mask. What you mean is, you don't like that I stopped letting you make decisions for me." "I've been trying to help," she snapped. "Everything I've done was for your benefit." "Was it?" I asked, calm as a stone. "Did I ask for the investment fund? The kitchen upgrade? The $900 wine shipment under my name?" Her face flushed. "Those were temporary transfers. We were going to reimburse." "You weren't," I said. "And you know it." She opened her mouth, closed it, then regrouped. "So, this is how it's going to be now? You're just going to accuse me of theft?" "I'm not accusing. I'm stating." She took a breath, tried to soften her voice. "Look, Mom, I get that you're feeling uncertain. Getting older is scary. But you don't have to go through it alone." "No," I said. "I don't. But I also don't have to go through it controlled, manipulated, discarded." She looked like she might cry then, but I didn't trust the tears. "You've always been dramatic," she said, quieter now. "You don't see the bigger picture. We were planning things for your care, your comfort." "My exit," I corrected. "Let's call it what it is. You're twisting everything." "Am I?" She looked away, jaw tight. "Sarah told me," I said, "about the file, about what you said to Alan, that I'd soon not need much, that I was starting to slip, that you were looking into facilities." She misunderstood. "No," I said, voice hardening. She didn't. A silence settled between us. Not the kind that comes from weariness, but the kind that comes from something rotting out in the open. "Give me the key," I said. "What?" "To my home, the spare key." "Give it back." "You can't be serious." "I am. This is my space. You don't enter it uninvited anymore." She stood there, stunned. "Now," I said. "Please." She reached into her purse and pulled it out, slowly, like it burned her fingers. I held out my hand, and she dropped it in my palm. "I don't know who you've been talking to," she said, "but they've poisoned you." "No one poisoned me," I said. "I just started listening." She turned without a word and walked out the door. When it clicked shut behind her, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My hand was still clenched around the key. It wasn't anger that shook in my limbs. It was relief. And under that, a quiet, growing resolve. The silence after Linda left didn't bring peace. It brought a peculiar kind of noise, thoughts clanging against each other like dishes in a broken sink. I sat for a while, holding that spare key in my palm. My hand had gone stiff. I opened my drawer, the one where I used to keep old bills, stamps, a few yellowing birthday cards from Sarah, and found the folder I hadn't touched in 2 years. Inside were my most important documents: birth certificate, Tom's death certificate, the original will, and tucked behind them, the paperwork Linda had asked me to sign right after his funeral. She'd said it was just in case of emergencies. I hadn't read it carefully. Now I did. It wasn't just a standard power of attorney. It was durable. And it wasn't limited to finances. It extended into medical decisions, estate transfers, even living arrangements. I reread the clause 3 times before I let the paper fall back onto the table. She could have moved me out of my home, sold my belongings, changed my doctors, signed me into a facility, and if I'd started to forget the names of street corners or misplace a pill bottle, she would have had all the justification she needed. My stomach turned. I called Gregory Hale. "I found another document," I said, "one I didn't understand when I signed it." "Describe it," he said gently. I read the title aloud. Then the clauses. He sighed. "That's more comprehensive than I thought. I'm going to need to file a full revocation with the county. We'll also want to notarize a letter stating you are of sound mind and acting independently. Will that be enough?" "It will be, if no one challenges it." "And if they do?" Gregory paused. "Then we let them, but they won't win." He scheduled a notary for the next morning. I hung up and sat in the quiet. A facility. That's what she was preparing. I could see it now, the gradual nudges, the changed medications, the new mail system she'd implemented where I never saw letters anymore. She'd even asked if I wanted help consolidating my prescriptions into blister packs, so you won't get confused. It had felt like kindness. Now I saw it as rehearsal. I walked to the mirror in the hallway. Not a full-length one, just a modest rectangle above a small oak table where I kept my keys. I looked at my face. The lines, the gray hair, the soft sag around the chin that used to bother me and now didn't. "You're still here," I said aloud. Then I said it again, firmer. "You're still here." Because I needed to hear it from myself. That night, I moved my medications back into the kitchen cabinet. I made a list of everything I take, doses, times, refill dates, and pinned it to the corkboard above the phone. Then I took the small fireproof box I kept under my bed and locked my legal documents inside. When I got into bed, I didn't read. I didn't sip tea. I lay on my back and stared at the ceiling, letting the truth settle like ash across my chest. Linda hadn't just tried to take my money. She'd tried to erase my autonomy, quietly, sweetly, strategically. But I was still breathing, and as long as I could breathe, I could act. The notary arrived just after 10 the next morning, a tall woman named Yvonne, with cropped silver hair and a leather folder tucked under her arm. "Mrs. Raines?" she said with a calm smile. "Mr. Hale sent everything. I just need a few signatures and your state ID." I showed her in and poured her a glass of water. She sat at the table like she'd done this 1,000 times, and I suppose she had. I wondered how many women like me she'd met. Women smiling politely while their hands trembled under the table. Not today. She slid the papers forward. "This first one revokes the medical directive naming your daughter as health proxy. It designates you as your sole decision-maker unless you appoint another in writing." I signed. This second document is a witness statement affirming you're of sound mind and capable of managing your own affairs. I signed again. And this last one removes any previously named secondary beneficiaries from financial, medical, or housing matters unless reinstated by you. I paused. That means Linda can't act on my behalf. At all? Not without a new notarized document. I pressed the pen to the page slowly, firmly, letting the ink settle like a seal. After she stamped everything, Yvonne stood, smoothing her skirt. If anyone tries to act in your name, legally or medically, these protect you. Make copies. Keep one here, one with your lawyer, and one in a locked place. I nodded. I have a firebox. Good, she said. Use it. She left with a handshake, no fuss. The door clicked shut behind her, and I stood in the middle of the kitchen, holding the signed forms like they were the deeds to my life. Because they were. Later that afternoon, I walked to the post office. Not the one closest to Linda's house, but the one across town, where no one would recognize me. I mailed Gregory's copies by priority envelope. I also picked up a new P.O. Box registration form. I'd have my mail redirected. No more help from Linda sorting it. When I returned, Sarah was waiting on the porch steps, her knees tucked under her chin. I heard yelling, she said softly. Earlier, Mom and Alan. I sat beside her. They'll yell louder before they go quiet. She nodded. I did it, I said. I signed the revocations. All of them. Her eyes widened. All? Medical, financial, housing, everything. Sarah looked at me like she wasn't sure whether to cheer or cry. She won't take it well. She's not meant to. We sat in silence for a while, the kind that felt like stitching something back together, not tearing it down. I've also started looking at apartments, I said finally. You're leaving? Not far, just elsewhere. Somewhere with a lock she doesn't have a copy of. Sarah didn't answer at first. Then she said, Can I help? Her voice cracked a little on the last word. I looked at her. This girl, not yet grown, but already stronger than most women twice her age. Yes, I said. You can. She stayed until evening, helping me sort papers into labeled folders. Legal, medical, financial, Sarah. We didn't talk about Linda. We didn't have to. Her silence had already said enough. As Sarah stood to leave, she looked at me for a long time. I'm sorry. You have nothing to be sorry for. Yes, I do. I should have told you sooner. I knew something was off. I reached for her hand. You knew, and you're here now. That's what matters. She nodded. You're not alone in this. No, I said, with more certainty than I'd had in years. I'm not. I took the bus the next morning. Not because I had to, my car was still parked behind the flat, though Linda had often referred to it as unreliable, but because I wanted the quiet time to think. The rumble of the engine, the gentle sway around corners, the anonymous presence of strangers around me. It gave me a kind of peace. The bus headed north toward the older part of town, where Tom and I had bought our first home, where I used to push Sarah in her stroller along cracked sidewalks lined with dogwood trees. I hadn't walked that street in years. When I stepped off at the corner of Jackson and Maple, the air felt different, cleaner, like no one here knew what had been done to me or what I had just undone. The house was still there, pale yellow, with a sagging porch rail and shutters that hadn't been repainted since the Bush administration. But it was solid. I stood across the street for a long time, remembering how it looked when we bought it. Tom hauling in boxes, me scrubbing kitchen tiles, both of us too tired to speak, but too in love to care. A for sale sign stood in the yard. It wasn't my house anymore. But the sight of that sign planted something in me. I walked the neighborhood for over an hour. A few blocks away, I spotted another sign, McAllister Properties, now leasing senior cottages. It sat in front of a row of one-story homes with tidy yards and wide porches. I crossed the street and peeked into the window of the small leasing office. A woman in a gray cardigan looked up from behind the desk and smiled through the glass. 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from her. "Are you looking for yourself, Mrs. Rains?" she asked kindly. "I am," I said. "No family with you today?" "No," I said again. "Just me." She handed me a glossy pamphlet. It showed floor plans, sample photos, cheerful living rooms with sunlight on oak floors. I didn't need cheer. I needed privacy, autonomy, and a porch that faced east. "We have a vacancy in Unit 7, she said. "Back of the complex. Quiet, new kitchen, no shared walls." I asked to see it. The place was small, just 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, but it felt like something I hadn't felt in a long time. Mine. No smell of someone else's food. No cabinet full of vitamins labeled by someone else's hands. Just clean light and empty walls. I stood in the living room, watching dust dance in a shaft of afternoon sun. I thought of Linda, of her tone, her control, her calculations. Then I thought of Sarah's hand on mine and the steadiness in her voice when she said, "You're not alone in this." "I'll take it," I said. The woman blinked. "You'd like to start the application?" "No, I'll take it." There was a pause, and then, "All right. We just need proof of income or assets and a small deposit to hold the unit." I pulled the folder from my bag. Gregory had prepared everything: proof of funds, identification, a copy of my revocation documents just in case. The deposit came from my new account, the one with no ties to Linda. An hour later, I left the leasing office with a set of keys. I didn't cry. Not because it wasn't emotional, but because it was mine. My decision, made without influence, guilt, or pressure. And after all these years of silence, that felt better than any sentiment I could name. Back on the bus, I sat in the same seat. This time facing forward, not sideways. At home, I called Sarah. "I found a place," I said. "I'm moving out." She didn't answer right away. Then, "Do you need help packing?" "No," I said. "But I want you there, when I leave. Not to carry boxes, just to witness it." She was quiet again. "Of course. I'll be there." As I hung up the phone, I looked around my little flat. I'd never hated it. But now, with my name off the lease and Linda still controlling the property, it felt like a paper box. One I'd been folded into slowly until I forgot how to push against the corners. Now, the lid was coming off, and I was walking out on my own. I started packing the next morning. I didn't tell Linda. I didn't owe her that. I boxed things slowly, just the essentials. Clothes, books, my cast-iron skillet, photo albums that had survived 5 moves and 1 basement flood. Everything else could stay or be discarded. I was done carrying dead weight. By noon, Sarah showed up with empty boxes and her sleeves rolled to the elbows. "You really going through with it?" she asked, though her voice already knew the answer. "I signed the lease," I said. "I have the keys. I'm not waiting for permission." We worked quietly. She taped, I folded. The rhythm felt like breathing. Halfway through, she opened a drawer and froze. "What's this?" She held up a document. A folded copy of my will, one I hadn't seen in years. But it wasn't the original. It had pen marks, revisions, and a sticky note in Linda's handwriting that read, "Pending final signature. Ask after next doctor visit." My stomach turned. I took it from her, sat down hard at the table. The revised version left everything to Linda. No mention of Sarah. No contingencies. Just a clean, efficient transfer of wealth. Not just my savings, but the car. The remaining insurance from Tom's policy. Even the old coin collection he'd kept in a fireproof case. She was preparing to finalize it, as if I were already halfway gone. I didn't speak for a while. Sarah sat across from me, her eyes fixed on my face like she was afraid I'd shatter. "She had no right," I said at last. "She probably didn't expect you to find it. Because she didn't expect me to look." That evening, just as we were sealing the last box, Linda knocked. I didn't answer. She opened the door anyway. Her eyes scanned the room, landing on the piles of packed belongings, the open drawers, the quiet finality of it all. "You're moving?" she said flatly. "I am." "To where?" "Doesn't matter." She stepped inside, voice sharper now. "You didn't tell me." "I didn't need to." "Mom, this is—" She looked around, as if hoping Sarah would chime in. "This is rash." "No," I said. "This is overdue." Her eyes settled on the document on the table. The will. Her face changed. "I was going to talk to you about that," she said quickly. "It's just a draft. We were waiting for you to—" "I never asked for a new draft. I thought it would make things easier." "For who?" Silence. I stepped forward, closed the folder slowly, deliberately. "You've taken enough," I said. "Money, space, trust. You don't get the rest." Linda crossed her arms. "You're overreacting. You've always had a flair for the dramatic." Sarah took a step toward her. "Don't?" Linda turned, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" "Don't talk to her like that," Sarah said, voice low but unshaking. "She's not the one who's lying." Linda's eyes flicked between us. "You think you're being noble," she said to Sarah, "but you're going to regret choosing sides." "I didn't choose sides," Sarah said. "I chose truth." Linda opened her mouth to reply, but I held up a hand. "We're done here," I said. "You're not welcome in this space anymore." "This is my property," she said sharply. "Not for long," I replied. That stopped her. I didn't elaborate. Let her wonder. Let her twist in that quiet. She left without slamming the door. The silence that followed was long, but not heavy. Not anymore. The movers came at 8 sharp. 2 polite young men in navy shirts who worked quickly and without questions. Sarah supervised the boxes while I signed forms. Linda didn't show her face. Maybe she finally understood I wasn't bluffing. Or maybe she just didn't want to see what it looked like when someone slipped out of her grasp without a fight. By noon, we were at the new place. Unit 7 sat at the back of the property, just like the woman in the leasing office had promised. No neighbors on either side. A small porch facing east. The sun had already warmed the wood when I stepped onto it for the first time. "This is yours," Sarah whispered as she stood behind me. "It is," I said, and it felt like it. Inside, the walls were bare. The air smelled faintly of fresh paint, and the kitchen floor still had sticker residue in the corners. But it was mine. No one had set it up for me. No one had helped by rearranging my things or choosing my drapes. This time, I'd choose everything. The movers placed the boxes where Sarah directed them, then left without a trace. No judgment, no conversation. Just the sound of a van pulling away down a quiet lane. Sarah and I unpacked the kitchen first. She lined up the mugs while I wiped the shelves. I watched her pause at one of them. A chipped green one Tom used every morning. She turned it over gently in her hands, then set it in the front of the row. "He used to let me drink cocoa from this," she said. I smiled. "He said it gave you early wisdom." We laughed quietly, not from joy, but from relief. That afternoon, we walked to the nearby market. A 10-minute stroll, flat sidewalk, no traffic. I hadn't walked like that in years. Sarah carried the heavier bags without comment. We filled the fridge together. Milk, fruit, cheese, the good butter I hadn't bought since Linda started managing my grocery deliveries. "Do you need me to stay tonight?" Sarah asked as the sun began to dip. "No," I said, "but I want you to come for dinner next week. Just you." She nodded. "I will." Before she left, she stopped in the doorway and looked around one more time. "This place suits you." "It feels quiet," I said. "In a good way." Sarah hugged me tightly. "I'm proud of you." I didn't say anything. I just held her a little longer than I meant to. When she left, I sat in the living room. The light was golden. I didn't turn on any lamps. I didn't need noise or movement or TV. I needed this. I made tea. I opened a book. I sat in a chair no one else had ever sat in, and I breathed. Later, when I went to bed, I pulled the covers up to my chin and smiled in the dark. No one knew where I was. No one had a key. And for the first time in years, no one had access to my life but me. The first full day in the new house started with silence. Not the kind of silence that follows a slammed door or a cold conversation, but the kind that drapes over your shoulders like a soft shawl. No footsteps above me. No car doors slamming in the driveway. No text from Linda asking if I'd taken my vitamins. Just quiet. I made coffee the way I like it. Strong, not bitter. I stood barefoot on the kitchen tile and watched steam curl up from the cup. The morning sun came in low and sharp, casting clean shadows on the floor. It felt like I'd stepped into someone else's life. Someone peaceful. Someone free. I spent the morning slowly putting things in place. I arranged the bookshelf. First the novels, then the poetry, then the cookbooks I rarely used but refused to part with. I hung the 2 framed pictures I'd taken from the flat. One of Tom and me on our 40th anniversary, laughing with cake on our noses. The other of Sarah at age 8, asleep on a pile of library books. Around noon, I opened the last box. It held a tangle of things I hadn't sorted. Old cards, receipts, scraps of paper I hadn't had the heart to throw away. Among them was a folded page from a calendar dated 2 years ago. In the corner was a note in Linda's handwriting. "Schedule Mom's checkup. Ask about cognitive screening." I stared at it for a long time. Cognitive screening. It wasn't new. But it still felt like a slap. She'd been planning this for years. Not just helping. Not just managing. She'd been measuring how long it would take to move me out of her way. I placed the paper in the trash. Not the shredder. Not the fire. Just the trash. Some things didn't need ceremony. They just needed to be gone. I ate lunch, standing at the kitchen counter. Cheese, bread, olives from a jar. Nothing plated. No one to impress. I drank a glass of water and didn't leave it in the sink. I washed it and put it back where it belonged. In the afternoon, I took a walk through the complex. There were a few others out, mostly women my age or older. Some with dogs, others with gardening gloves. One woman smiled at me as we passed, and I nodded politely. It was still too early for conversation. I wasn't ready to be known here. Not yet. Back home, I sat on the porch. The wood was warm under my feet. I watched a bird hop along the edge of the railing, fearless and twitchy. A robin, I thought, or something close to it. I realized I hadn't paid attention to birds in years. I thought about calling Sarah, just to say hello, but I didn't. She knew where I was. She would come when she was ready. The sun lowered. Shadows stretched across the grass. A breeze moved through the hedges, and I felt that familiar ache in my knees, the kind Tom used to call weather warnings. I made tea, strong and dark. The house creaked a little in the evening, settling into its own rhythm. I walked through it slowly, turning off lights one by one. I ran a bath, sat for 20 minutes in silence, and thought about nothing. That was the best part. The nothing. I didn't think about Linda, or her face when I told her no. I didn't think about all the small ways she chipped away at me over the years. I didn't even think about what might happen next. I just let the water go warm, then cool, then still. In bed, I read a few pages of an old novel, then turned out the light. The room was quiet. The walls didn't breathe like the flat used to. The air didn't carry the sound of someone else's footsteps. And in the dark, I wasn't waiting for anything. Not the phone to ring. Not the door to open. I was just there. Alive. Whole. Mine. The next morning, I opened the front door to find a small flyer rubber banded to the handle. It read, Wednesday afternoon group. Tea, talk, light movement. No pressure. Come as you are. There was no logo, no organization name. Just a time, a location. Community Room B near the leasing office, and a line in pen at the bottom. You're new. I thought you might like to know we're here. No signature. I held the flyer in my hand for a while before setting it on the table. By noon, I'd forgotten about it. I cleaned the kitchen, reorganized the hallway closet, ironed a blouse I hadn't worn in months. I told myself I was fine being alone. I didn't need small talk or social niceties. I had earned my quiet. But when 3 o'clock came, I found myself standing at the edge of Community Room B. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, I heard soft voices, a kettle whistling, chairs scraping against the floor, the kind of noise you don't hear in a vacuum, the kind that only comes from people who expect nothing and offer everything. I pushed the door open. 5 women sat around a table with mismatched mugs and a plate of shortbread cookies. They looked up, not startled, just curious. Come in, one of them said. Her voice was warm but not sweet. I did. They didn't ask who I was. They didn't ask why I came. Someone slid a chair out for me. Another passed me a mug without comment. I'm Elise, said the woman nearest me, a sharp-eyed woman with silver curls pinned high. This is Hetty, Rose, Nora, and Marion. We're not a club. We just like to check that we're still alive on Wednesdays. That made me smile. I'm Martha, I said. Just moved into Unit 7. That's the quiet one, Nora said. Lucky. I sipped the tea. It was strong, no sugar. They didn't ask about children, or marriage, or where I came from. Just small things. How I liked the light in the morning, if the shower pressure was decent, whether the walls creaked at night. I felt something shift. Not big, but real. After the tea, Hetty pulled out a box of small rubber balls and motioned to the back of the room. Light movement, she said. Doctor's orders. No spandex required. We stood in a slow, crooked circle. Raised our arms, rolled our shoulders, stretched until our joints sighed. Someone put on quiet jazz. Elise moved like she'd been a dancer once. Her hands still remembered more than her knees could follow. I moved gently, not because I couldn't go faster, but because I didn't want to miss anything. Every stretch felt like a thread tugged back into place. Afterwards, Rose handed me another flyer. Same time next week, she said. Or don't come. Either way, you'll still be one of us. I smiled. I might come. They didn't fuss, didn't hug, just nodded and went their way. When I walked home, the light was soft and low. I passed a woman watering her plants on her porch. She waved. I waved back. At home, I set the second flyer on the kitchen counter beside the first. I didn't need them, but I liked knowing they were there. That evening, I sat on the porch and called an old number, one I hadn't dialed in over a year. "Hello?" said a voice I knew like an old song. "Anita," I said. "It's Martha." There was a pause, then a breath, then, "My God, I thought you'd disappeared." "I almost did," I said. "What happened?" "Something I stopped allowing." Another pause. Longer this time. Then a quiet, "Good." We talked for 40 minutes, no pleasantries, just the truth in measured doses. She told me about her dog dying. I told her about Linda. "She tried to fold me into her version of my life," I said. "And I didn't even notice until the edges disappeared." "That's what they do," Anita said. "Some children love their parents in small, convenient pieces, not whole." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Before we hung up, she said, "Call again, even if you don't know what to say." "I will." And I meant it. When I went to bed that night, the house didn't feel quite as new. It felt inhabited. And for the first time, I realized I didn't just escape something. I'd arrived. She found me, of course. I knew she would. I'd made it 5 days without hearing from Linda. 5 days without texts, emails, phone calls laced with forced concern. I thought maybe she'd gotten the message. Maybe silence was her final retreat. But on the 6th day, she showed up. She knocked, not with the knuckles, but with the flat of her hand. 3 soft, deliberate thumps that said, "I know where you are, and I haven't gone anywhere." I didn't answer right away. She knocked again. I opened the door. She stood on the porch in a beige coat too expensive for the weather, clutching her bag like it might be snatched from her. Her face was carefully set in something like remorse. "I'm not here to argue," she said. "Good," I replied. "I don't entertain arguments on my porch." She smiled, too quickly. "You look, well." I let that sit between us like smoke. "I just wanted to see that you're all right." "You came to look," I said, "not to listen." She took a breath. "Mom, I know things got out of hand. I pushed too much. I see that now. I was just trying to keep everything manageable." "For who?" Her eyes flicked away. "You have to understand," she said. "After Dad died, it was like you faded. You were grieving, lost. I stepped in. I helped. You took over. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that." Her jaw tightened, but she softened it quickly. "I thought you'd be grateful." I let out a short laugh, not cruel, just tired. "Grateful?" I said. "For what? For losing my name on my accounts? For the medications I didn't recognize? For my own will sitting in your desk with lines drawn through it?" "That was Alan," she said quickly. "He was thinking ahead." "So were you," I said. "Just not for me." She said nothing. I watched her face change in small, careful ways. I saw her calculate the next tone, the next move. "I brought something," she said, reaching into her bag. I didn't stop her. Let her play the part. She pulled out a photo frame, one of me and Sarah at the beach 5 years ago. My arm around her, sand in our hair, a real smile, no staging. "You left this," she said, holding it out. "I thought maybe—" I didn't take it. "Keep it," I said. "You seem to need it more." That broke the edge of her smile. "You're really cutting me out," she said. "After everything I've done." "You did a lot," I said. "That's true." Her voice went low. This isn't how family works. No, I said, but it's how mine works now. She shifted her weight. What are you going to do if you get sick? If you fall? If you start forgetting? I'll deal with it, I said, on my own terms. She looked me up and down, as if assessing my odds. This place won't save you, she said quietly. I stepped back and gently closed the door. Not a slam, not a scene, just a choice. Inside, I exhaled. I didn't shake. I didn't cry. I sat on the couch and waited for the knock that didn't come again. She left. This time, I knew it. Later, I called Gregory, told him she'd found my address, asked him to make a note. He said he already had. After dinner, I opened the windows. The air smelled like earth and honeysuckle. The photo frame still sat on the porch step. I left it there. By morning, it was gone. 2 weeks passed. The days folded into one another with a kind of soft rhythm. I made coffee each morning. I read. I walked. I started tending to a small patch of soil behind my unit. Just enough space for herbs and 2 tomato plants. Elise from the Wednesday group gave me cuttings. Marion brought marigold seeds in a napkin like she was passing a secret. I didn't feel young, but I didn't feel old in the way Linda spoke the word. I felt steady. At some point during that second week, Sarah came again. No warning, just the sound of light footsteps on the porch and a face that still made me feel like I hadn't failed completely. She had a small paper bag in one hand and a tight smile. I brought muffins, she said, and a question. I opened the door wide. Come in. We sat at the table and she set the bag between us. Blueberry. Still warm. You heard about Mom? She asked, picking at a paper napkin. No, I don't hear about your mother anymore. She's furious. Told Alan she was cut out like a stranger. She was. Sarah nodded. She says she wants to apologize. She says she was trying to protect you. I sipped my tea before answering. That's what people say when what they were really protecting was their comfort. She asked me to mediate, Sarah said. Said maybe I could help soften you. I smiled. And you said? I told her she's not allowed to speak through me anymore. I reached across the table, placed my hand lightly on hers. That's a hard line to draw. I'm proud of you. She didn't smile. Instead, she said, she told me you're leaving me everything. She shouldn't know that. She went through your old files, the ones you left in the flat. There were copies. I felt something sink in my chest. Not because of the files, but because she had gone back, still looking for leverage, still trying to read the end of a story she no longer belonged to. I don't want your money, Sarah said suddenly, her voice cracking. I want you. I know, but I'm scared. What if something happens to you and I'm the only one left? I don't know how to protect you. You don't have to, I said gently. I'm protecting myself now. That's the whole point. She blinked fast. You don't owe me anything, I added. Not loyalty, not defense, not even visits. You just owe yourself the right to choose who you love and how. She let out a shaky breath. I just want a version of us that doesn't have her standing between us. I nodded. So do I. And I think we're already there. We sat in silence for a moment, letting it settle. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I found this, she said. It was at the bottom of a drawer in your old flat. I don't think she saw it. I opened the box. Inside was the locket Tom gave me on our 25th anniversary. I hadn't seen it since we moved into the flat. I thought I lost this. You didn't. I closed it gently. Thank you. Do you want me to put it somewhere safe? No, I said. I'll wear it. We had muffins. She told me about school, about an essay she was working on, about how Alan had started drinking earlier in the day. I listened without trying to fix anything. That, I was learning, was enough. Before she left, I asked, "Do you still feel scared?" She thought for a moment. "A little." "Good," I said. "That means you're paying attention." She hugged me tightly, her arms firmer than I remembered. "I love you," she said into my shoulder. "I know," I said. And this time, I believed it. It's been 3 months. The tomatoes came in slower than I'd hoped, but they're sweet. The mint spread too far, as mint always does, and I've stopped fighting it. My hair has thinned a little more. My sleep is lighter. But I wake up in a house where every object belongs to me, and no one watches how I hold my cup or questions what I forget. Linda hasn't come again. She sent a letter once. Long, full of apologies that weren't really apologies. The kind that say, "I'm sorry you feel that way." I didn't respond. I shredded it, not in anger, but in peace. Some doors don't need to be slammed. They just need to stay closed. Sarah still visits. Not every day, but often enough. She brings small things. An article she found. A book she thinks I'll like. Cookies she tried baking for the first time. She doesn't ask about the past anymore. We've made space for the present. I've joined the Wednesday women twice more. I don't talk much. I don't need to. Just being among others who've survived things no one writes down is enough. We move together. We drink strong tea. We look each other in the eye like people who recognize the fine thread between holding on and letting go. One afternoon, Elise asked, "Do you feel free?" I answered without thinking. "I feel aware." And that was better. I've written a new will, not because of spite, but because I needed a record that told the truth. I've left the house to Sarah. Not for what she's done, but for who she is. I've written her a letter to be opened after I'm gone. It's short. Just a few lines. But I think they'll hold. I've also written something else. A small sheet of paper taped to the inside of my cupboard. It says, "If you're reading this, and someone has made you feel smaller than you are, I want you to know, you are not broken. You are not forgetful. You are not too late. You are still here." And that's enough to begin. I don't know who will find it someday, but I hope they do. There's a kind of strength that doesn't look like a fight. It looks like a woman sitting alone in her chair, pouring one cup of tea, and not asking permission to exist. That's where I am. And if you've read this far, maybe that's where you are too. So I'll say it plainly. If someone tried to write you out of your own life, pick up the pen. If someone tried to plan your exit, unlock the door and walk forward. And if you're still breathing, you're not done. Neither am I.